This portion of the meeting, half an hour from 12:30 to 1. We had a extended executive session, so I apologize for making everybody wait from 12:30 to 1. It was unavoidable. I'm calling this meeting to order as we are preparing and continuing to transition in person. Some of the participants, including the commissioners, are on teleconference, and this Port Authority meeting is being live streamed from the Port Authority website. Today's public session will start with the Committee on Finance, which will be chaired by Commissioner Cohen, which will be followed by a meeting on the Committee on Capital Planning, Execution, and Asset Management, which will be chaired by our Vice Chair, Jeff Linford, and we'll conclude the public portion with a board meeting. Can we have a roll call first of commissioners?
Where's Jed?
The chairman, Chairman O'Toole, Vice Chairman Linford, Commissioners Cohen, LaBarbera, Martinotti, Rosado, Menendez, McCabe, Horowitz, and Richardson are all present.
Thank you, Jim. Commissioner Cohen?
Thank you very much, and hello, everybody. Today's meeting of the Committee on Finance is being held in public session. The committee also in executive session met earlier today in executive session to discuss matters related to ongoing negotiations or reviews of contracts or proposals. At this point, I ask the Secretary to advise those present of the composition of the Committee on Finance and any commissioner recusals on the matter before the committee at today's meeting.
The Committee on Finance is composed of Commissioner Cohen, the committee chair, Commissioner McCabe, the committee vice chair, and Commissioners Horowitz, Menendez, and Richardson. All committee members are present. In addition to the committee members, Chairman O'Toole, Vice Chairman Linford, Commissioners LaBarbera, Martinotti, and Rosado are also present. As there are no requests for action, there are no recusals required.
Great, thank you very much. And I now turn to our Chief Financial Officer, Libby McCarthy, to present financial performance results for the first quarter of 2022. Libby, are you there?
I am, Commissioner, and thank you. So, good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm pleased to present our first quarter financial results. I'm going to open my my presentation with my usual reminder that the unaudited condensed financial information as of and for the 3 months ended March 31st, 2022 should be read in conjunction with the financial statements, the annual financial statements of the Port Authority, which are available on the website. Any information provided herein with respect to forward-looking impacts from COVID-19 represents the Port Authority's current assessments based on the data it had available at the time the financial information was compiled. As such, this data may ultimately prove to be inaccurate or incomplete, especially when reviewed over a longer period of time. So let me start with just a few key highlights. While I look forward to the day when I can no longer say that this first quarter financial result it once again is best understood and best framed in the context of the continued evolution of the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on activity levels at Port Authority facilities. Within the past year, the Port Authority has seen a sharp increase in activities across the agency's facilities. However, the onset of the Omicron variant at the end of last year adversely impacted the pace of that recovery at aviation and PATH facilities, and to a lesser extent, the bridges and tunnels in the first 2 months of this year. Overall, activity across the agency's facilities for the first quarter of 2022 improved significantly compared with the first quarter of 2021. But because of the temporary negative impacts of the Omicron variant and severe weather on certain facilities, activities for the first quarter of this year finished below plan for all facilities other than our marine ports. Despite the lower than planned activity levels, however, gross operating revenues, which were $179 million or 16% higher year over year, were in line with plan. That's because the higher than planned rental and parking revenues offset the lower than planned activity generated revenues of tolls, fares, and aviation fee revenues. Total operating expenses for the first quarter increased $50 million or 6% as compared to the first quarter of 2021. This increase was in support of the higher activity levels across our facilities. Operating expenses for the quarter were 2% lower or better than budget. As a result, net operating income for the first 3 months of the year was $129 million, or 37% higher than the first quarter of 2021, and $11 million, or 2% higher than planned. A very strong result. Let's move on and drill down into these results. Here you can see the overall results for the first quarter of 2022 as compared to 2021, and that increase in net operating income I just spoke of. Overall, after consideration of non-operating expenses, the agency incurred a decrease in net position of $121 million for the first quarter of 2022. This result is a substantial improvement over the decrease in net position of $251 million incurred during the first quarter of 2021. Moving to the next slide, as I previously mentioned, activity volumes across many of the Port Authority facilities continue to be adversely impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic and are experiencing varying speeds of recovery depending on the business line. This slide shows the first quarter activity volumes of 2022 in green, 2021 in yellow, and as a pre-COVID reference point, 2019 in light blue. The airports are on the left and PATH is on the right. While aviation and PATH to a lesser extent finished the quarter above the activity levels achieved in 2021, activity volumes remain below pre-pandemic volumes of 2019. Aviation activity, particularly domestic travel, continues to recover closer to pre-COVID-19 levels, as total volumes for the first quarter represented 76% of 2019 levels. Despite the temporary impacts of the Omicron variant and weather on aviation activities at the beginning of the year, there have been certain weeks during the past 2 months, specifically President's Day weekend in mid-February and recent school spring break weeks, where total weekly volumes were close to or higher than the same period in 2019. For the quarter, aviation finished 6% under plan overall. PATH, like other mass transit commuter systems throughout the country, continues to see a depressed level of ridership due to a delay in employees returning to the workplace and the potential shifts to remote or hybrid working for many employees. PATH ridership finished the quarter at 44% of pre-COVID activity levels and 34% lower than budget. This next slide shows activity levels for our bridges and tunnels on the left and our marine ports on the right. These facilities have proven to be more resilient during the pandemic as they continued to move essential workers and goods throughout the region and the nation. Bridge and tunnel activity was impacted by winter weather-related events that caused a decline in activity during January. However, as you can see in the chart on the left, activities in February and March were in line with 2019 volumes. TB&T activity is currently 4% lower than budget for the year, but trending toward those budget lines. Finally, our marine port activity continues to break record levels. Port activity is currently 22% higher than budget for the year, and in March was 9% higher than March of 2021. As previously mentioned on the next slide, the agency's first quarter gross operating revenues of $1.3 billion represent a significant increase year over year of $179 million, or 16%. This improved performance was fueled by the continued recovery of activity volumes across the agency's facilities. The underperformance of activity-based tolls, fares, and aviation fee revenues during the quarter as compared to the budget were offset by the higher-than-planned rentals as well as parking and other revenues. As such, gross operating revenues finished in line with 2022 plan. Moving on to expenses, operating expenses totaled $826 million in the first quarter of 2022, an increase of $50 million compared to the first quarter of last year. This increase supported the significantly increased activity volumes across the facilities. Compared to budget, the first quarter operating expenses were 2% lower than planned, primarily attributed to timing of contract and consultant expenses, which we expect to catch up as the year progresses, in addition to lower snow and ice removal expenses during the quarter. And moving to cash flows and liquidity. Cash flow from operations increased dramatically by $604 million from the same three-month period in 2021 as activity volumes and thus gross operating revenues rebounded. Cash and investments as of March 31st totaled $3.9 billion, an increase of approximately $100 million from year-end. This balance includes $21 million in funds borrowed to support our capital construction program. In addition to cash and investments, as of March 31st, 2022, the Port Authority had approximately $251 million of commercial paper capacity available to support its capital program. When excluding general reserve funds and capital funds, cash and investments as of March 31st represented 143 days of cash on hand. Finally, bonds and other financing obligations as of March 31st, 2022 totaled $27.6 billion, which is approximately $100 million lower than the year-end balance. This decrease is due to a decrease in commercial paper notes outstanding. That concludes my remarks, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
And are there any questions from any of the commissioners or any comments with respect to Libby's report and update? Hearing none, this concludes today's meeting of the Committee on Finance. Back to you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you.